My name's Emum Elliot and I play Guillaume Dumas. Working with Chris, I worked with him before on Black Death, as I said, which was I think about 2 years ago now. And Kerrick as well, who's our second unit director, we also worked together. And Chris's energy hasn't changed at all. You know, if something doesn't feel right, he's completely open to change. He'll always make sure that you're happy with what you're doing before we roll. And we'll often come along and say, what do you think of this? What can we do? How can we make it better? Maybe you should say this instead of that. So completely open to change. And I think most of the best directors are, because what people forget is the script is never really the finished article. It's almost an idea of what something could become. It's like a seed. And Chris is great at sort of taking that and just allowing it to breathe, and allowing the cast to explore different avenues and different paths. And I think that's where the best work comes out. I did do a lot of research. It's always a tricky one. You're never sure if something's going to help or not. You just have to do it, and then you find out when you get on set. But I did a lot of historical research and just bought lots of books and used the internet and kind of watched various documentaries and videos and did all the standard stuff. But you know, sometimes you read an entire book and there's just one line of that book that is actually going to help you. But I think subconsciously looking into historical elements of, this is set in 1209, so looking into that time kind of subconsciously helps you. And even if you think it's not helping you at all, and I think it does, and learning about the way of life and how dangerous it was in those times, especially being a chevalier. You could literally, your life could end the next day. The stakes were just very high. There's a great journey for him. I think he starts off as this, what seems like this bad man who kills for a living and cheats on his wife. And not only cheats on his wife, but cheats on her with her own sister. So it was about redeeming. It's about redeeming himself. And that's a massive, I think that's something that people can relate to. I think when guilt gets on top of you like that, the only way out of it is to redeem yourself. And it's kind of a selfish thing, possibly, because he's doing it for himself. He feels as if he owes the world something because of the sins that he's committed. So there was that. It's sort of a learning curve for Guillaume. And when it's revealed that he's cheating on Alaïs, I think it's a massive turning point there, and he spends the rest of the story trying to make amends, not only with her but with himself. And you have to remember that these were very pious, religious times. So these were God-fearing people. I don't think there was any doubt in anyone's mind that there was something after death, and we'd be judged on that. So I think the fear really kicks in halfway through the story. He looks back in retrospect to what he's done and tries to cancel that stuff out with goodness and righteousness. But the costume's amazing. I have to wear a lot of chainmail also in this, and it's the real deal. It's metal. So it's very heavy. And I think people underestimate medieval men. I think everyone thinks everyone was very small and kind of weak back then, but I'm telling you, this chainmail is kind of pretend chainmail, but still very heavy. If you're wearing that stuff for a day or even a couple hours during a battle, it takes a hell of a lot of strength and even mental endurance. It affects the way you move too. So it gives you a certain weight. But loads of costume changes, and the Moira, who's the head of the department, was great in being very open. And she kind of listened to my ideas before she presented me with her own. Luckily we were on the same level there, but it's been a real collaboration with everyone. I did a bit of riding before on Black Death, maybe like a couple of days throughout the shoot. But I was riding with Sean Bean, so he just kind of led the way and my horse would follow. I felt very safe. But on this, I'm kind of on my own out there and trying to lead the way. But it's something I enjoy, and I think if you enjoy it, then you forget about the risk element a lot of the time and really start to get into it. There were a couple of moments that I wasn't allowed to do, and I wouldn't have been up for doing either, to be honest. There was a part where I have to fall off a horse. My horse rears and I tumble off, and it's not that I wouldn't have been up for doing it, but I would have definitely done something terrible, and I do have to come in the next day. And also the stunt guys out here are just solid. I mean, they're all big softies, but on the outside they're just tough men who know exactly how to do that. And I've been working with Franz and Anton and Paul and Julian, and they've all got your back. You know, I remember they filmed a rehearsal of one of the fight scenes, and he sent it to me, and I watched it back that night, and I must have watched it like 30 times. And not because I was focusing on my own performance, but there was this real, I felt quite moved, because these guys are here to make you look good. And if they wanted to, I mean, they could tear me apart. It's extremely physical, and I think I underestimated that when I read this script. You know, you look at the sort of the stage directions of fights, and you think, well, that's going to be fine, and you focus on dialogue and scenes, really. So I underestimated how physical it was going to be. But it all helps, and it just helps to give you that feeling of being a chevalier and someone who's able to, you know, chop somebody in half. And it's got to look real. Franz, the stunt coordinator, and he was saying these swords were so heavy and the chainmail was so heavy, it would literally be 1 or 2 hits and the guy would be down and you'd move on to the next man. So there's no sort of dancing around with the same chap. You're just cutting through, you know, man after man. And Chris also likes to shoot everything in one take. So it's not like you're doing little 2-second cutaways. You're doing the whole thing over and over again. And that sort of physical exhaustion. The stunt guys are always like, just do it for real, just try and kill me. So that's what I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks, but have yet to succeed. I also don't think many people know about the Cathar people. And it's something I had no idea about, because many of the records, many of the books have been destroyed by the Crusaders. So I think that'll be interesting. And it was certainly fascinating reading. And again, just to go back to the Cathar people, they're almost like medieval Buddhists. They were kind of way ahead of their time. This is 1209, and they're talking about this idea of 2 separate gods, and sort of the earth being this prison rather than this sanctuary. And they were very into spirituality and respecting each other and not eating meat. You know, a lot of them were vegetarians and didn't believe in violence. So they were a really peaceful people, and it's actually really sad that they've been wiped out. So I think that in itself is fascinating. Aside from that, there's an incredible group of actors that are really bringing all sorts of brilliance to the table. And it's Chris Smith, and this production team is just incredible. They've proved that they can really make things like this work in the past. And we're really taking a risk with this. I mean, there's supernatural religious elements too, so the audience are really going to have to take a leap there in terms of the storyline with the Holy Grail. So it's like, has very real, gritty elements, but also something quite magical. And it's, yeah, sort of 4 or 5 hours of epic television. So yeah, it's going to be a real journey. When I first met Gilpin, I don't know what I was expecting, really. And these things actually existed, war dogs. I think the Romans used them, and you know, they clearly used them in 1209, but these dogs would be faithful hounds. They would literally fight alongside their master, in this case, Guillaume. So Gilpin is there with me throughout a big chunk of the story, so it's important that we bonded. And when I first met him, I think when he stands on his back legs, he's just a couple inches taller than I am. I mean, he's huge. So it was quite intimidating at first. I mean, I love dogs, but he's a bit more of a horse dog. He's huge, but he's very friendly. And there was this thing on the call sheet for the first few weeks when he was in, saying no one is allowed to touch Gilpin except Guillaume. So that's a big responsibility. You know, he needs a certain amount of love, And that love had to come from me, usually in the form of a biscuit.